Today, we're talking to Packy McCormick. He's the former VP of Experience at Breather and had a career as an investment banker before that. For the past year, he's been writing a weekly newsletter called Not Boring, where he explores business strategy and trends through the lens of popular culture. Packy has been a mentor and an inspiration to me over the past year as I've written my own newsletter, Sunday Snapshots. So today, I caught up with Packy to talk about the lessons, trials, and tribulations that we've both learned through the past year. I hope you enjoy. All right. So Packy, thanks for having this chat. And, I'm excited to just kind of go through, what the lessons learned on both ends of, writing a newsletter for about a year. I think just to spot check, like when are you coming up on the 1 year anniversary? Do you know the exact date?
Yeah, first of all, thanks for having me. This is going to be a lot of fun. I think May 19th was the first time that I sent mine. How about yours?
So I think mine was the 27th or the 28th. This week's is going to be mine, my 1 year anniversary of writing.
Congrats.
It. Yeah, same to you, man. It's been super cool. So, where I just wanted to start was I know you through David Perell's Rite of Passage, but I wanted to see, before that, like obviously you came into that class with kind of this purpose of writing online, but where did that originally start? If you could take that back if you could take us back to that point in time.
To why I decided I wanted to write online?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a good question. So at the time I was at a company called Breather. I was our VP experience. And I realized how important kind of internally writing was to my job to be able to write out kind of documents. Obviously, Amazon is famous for their 6-page memos. We didn't do anything as formal as that, but I felt like the ability to kind of communicate with the written word internally was super helpful in getting where I got there. And I had always kind of liked writing, whether it was creative writing or kind of the type of writing that I do now, which is more kind of bloggy. But just had tried to write online a couple of times, hated what I wrote, and then deleted the Medium posts. And then I saw a tweet from David talking about this course. I had some learning and development budget at Breather to spend, and I figured this was the best possible way to do it, something that would both help me kind of at Breather, but then kind of beyond that as well. So that's how I ended up deciding to take the course. How about you?
So I was actually working for David, so I kind of got the course for free as my learning and development budget. And throughout the class, people would ask me questions about starting newsletters and just like, hey, like how should I do this? How should I do that? And so I was kind of like, maybe I should have one just as a just to kind of go through the same experience. But I always did a lot of reading, and obviously, I as sort of a college student, I always enjoyed looking at things that were outside of class. And so for me, when I read books or when I read articles and I was like, I wonder why they did that. That was kind of the itch that I was scratching for myself. And I think most of the things I write about, it's things that I'm interested in, and I am hoping to find an audience who's interested in the same things. And I mean, I definitely see that in your writing, where it's really, like it's through the lens of like pop culture, and that's it's a really unique take, and I've really enjoyed it. But how'd you kind of get to that style of writing?
Yeah, it's a good question. I guess maybe we take a second and just kind of introduce what each of us
Yes.
writes about.
Yes.
So I write a newsletter called Not Boring. Send it out now twice a week, which is insane. But during the quarantine, when there's a little bit more free time, it's been really fun. But it's really about kind of the intersection of something that I've always been interested in, which is kind of the business, strategy, finance, economics side of the world. And then combined with pop culture to make it a little bit more fun and approachable. And so recently I've written things talking about Amazon's content to commerce strategy through the lens of a fashion show that they put on called Making the Cut, I wrote about an old Hey Arnold episode and how it explained kind of the glut in digital experiences that we're seeing. So really trying to combine those two different things. And I think, you can squeeze in a lot of learning kind of in a fun kind of narrative form. Something that took me a year to arrive at. I think both of us and probably a lot of people who end up taking the course or who start writing think that they are the most interesting generalist in the world. And I certainly thought that. And so I was like, oh, I'll just write about really whatever's on my mind. And some week that might be politics, some week that might be real estate or X, Y, or the other thing. And I mean, in the course, David said that that's really not the way to do it. That you have to find your personal monopoly. That's kind of the intersection of all of your personal interests and experiences that make what you have to say unique. And I kind of didn't believe it. But then really over the past kind of month and a half, I've started writing at the intersection of business strategy and pop culture, and it's taken off from there. So I think, to your point, if you can find people who are interested in the same things that you are, then it just really resonates a lot more. And it's a lot easier for people to find that within a specific niche. Tell me about your newsletter.
Yeah, so I write a newsletter called Sunday Snapshots, and it's basically three core things. So books, academic papers, and business. I think those were the three things that I thought that I had a unique perspective into. I think I read different books than other people do. I think I am, when it comes to academic papers, I was able to explain it to non-technical audiences really well. And then I just thought that I had, an eye for non-obvious business news. And so I think those are kind of where it started. And then those are things that I have stuck with, whether that's the first issue or whether that's going to be next week's. But over the course, I have expanded into new sections. Things like during the quarantine, I've been talking about the movies I watch, or if I use a new app and I really like it, I kind of have a section called App of the Week, and then this is a fan favorite, which is Meal of the Week. Yeah. And people do really enjoy that. I've been told that people just like scroll through and then they close. And I say, as long as I'm getting to open on that, I'm totally fine.
The last pasta looked delicious.
Yeah, thanks so much. I mean, yeah, and so it's been so that's kind of what I write about. And yeah, I mean, for me, it's been it's really just been about meeting new people. Yep. And I'm sure you've experienced this as well. That once you start writing, it's almost like other people are attracted to the same things you're attracted to, and then they will reach out. And I've had conversations with whom, like, as a 22-year-old, like, I would not have been able to have a conversation with if I even like reached out to them. I mean, the alternative is like a cold email or something, right? Yep. And I don't think that would have resonated as much with them as reading something that I wrote, and they're like, oh yeah, it'd be cool to talk. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, one of the reasons that you reached out and said that we should have this conversation is that we're both kind of in this around 1,000 subscriber range, and so it's not something unachievable at all. It's not something that either of us, I'd like to think that we're both good writers and all of that, but we have no kind of superpower that we were born with that makes it the case. And I think what you just said is one of the really interesting points about writing is that, of course, if you're someone with 50,000 Twitter followers, it's pretty easy to get a conversation with them. So when I took the course and started writing, that's actually something that I was skeptical about, was this idea of the serendipity engine, of the fact that all of these interesting things will be attracted to you if you start writing, and all these interesting people and conversations. And it's been one of the coolest parts of the experience so far, has been having people that either I really respect their writing or what they've done in business or X, Y, or Z thing, reach out and actually want to engage in a real conversation, and vice versa, to your point, being able to reach out saying, hey, I wrote this thing, makes it a lot more likely that they're willing to talk. So that has been one of the greatest things, and you don't need 50,000 followers to get there.
Oh yeah, totally. And I think another reason why we wanted to do this is kind of as a bookmark for us. Hopefully we'll be writing, at least a little bit into the future. And so it'd be cool to just, come back to this and see. It's almost like a time capsule. Um,
Yeah.
so, one of the questions I had is, walk me through the process of just writing one of these newsletters for you, and how has that changed over the course of the, of the year? Talk to me about how you, when you started, and how it is now.
Yeah. So I think it's changed pretty dramatically. I don't have any really formal structure around it, but probably about a week or so out, I'll start thinking about what the next week's topic is going to be. I really need to start banking a list of potential topics, but I want them to kind of be timely and relevant. So I'll start thinking about what that topic's going to be. One of the other fun things about writing is that when you think that you're going to write about something, you start seeing things that are connected everywhere. And so you approach reading differently, you approach browsing Twitter differently. Like, you're just kind of more aware and looking out for things that might work for your piece. So about a week out, I'll start thinking about the idea, start looking for things that fit. I don't want to be a hashtag Rome cult person, but I've started using Rome just because I'm messy and it works because I'm messy and whatever. So I'll throw them in there, and I'll make a particular tag for each one of the pieces that I'm writing, and really just start dumping things and like thinking about the argument. My brother has been my kind of de facto editor. And so like throughout the week, I'll just like throw ideas at him or say like, how about if I do X, Y, or Z thing this way? Because I'm writing on Thursday, and Thursday is kind of like either a guest post or something that's a follow up to Monday, and then some links and listens. Monday is a long form, like 3,000 word essay every week now, which is a lot, but that means that I really start kind of writing Monday on Thursday afternoon, which means that the weekend is a lot of writing. So I need to figure out that process a little bit too. But really just taking the notes that I have, structuring, kind of like throwing a first dump onto the paper. I use either Google Docs or just write directly in Substack. Send it to my brother, have him kind of edit a first draft, tell me which parts are terrible and don't resonate, go back to the drawing board, get something that's like pretty close to done, then start going into Figma and making terribly designed images for the piece. But there's really no good structure on it. It's just dumping a lot of things, starting to write, and then figuring out kind of where things fit and how to make the argument. And then also, because I tend to be optimistic, kind of trying to poke holes in my own thinking. And like, I think a lot of my pieces come off as maybe too optimistic, and I need to work on that towards like the subject of the piece. So really now I'm starting to think like, what's the counter argument to everything that I'm saying here? And then hit send, and that's it.
No, that's a pretty involved week. I mean, the next obvious question is, how do you figure out what to write about?
I wish I had a better process for that. But really, it's the types of things that are interesting me in any particular week or over the course of time. So this past week, I wrote about Slack's stock performance versus Zoom's, because it's something that I've been thinking about for a little while, and I hadn't read any good explanation of why Zoom's has kind of outperformed Slack by like 4x since the beginning of the quarantine. And since I hadn't found it, I wrote it. I try to find things that I'm both interested in that kind of fit a framework that people can learn from. So for this one, we talked about the 7 powers, these like 7 different moats in business strategy and how they apply to the particular situation. But really, it's kind of like, if I'm interested in something, I start there and then figure out if I can actually make it something that people can learn from, and if there's a way that I can write it, either using pop culture or some like relevant kind of analogies in a way that's more kind of enjoyable for people to consume and absorb.
No, that's awesome. I mean, I think you said it, which is, I didn't find it, so I wrote it. Right. And I think that's been really cool to see, because I don't think anyone else is doing the pop culture and business strategy. You see memes on Twitter, but apart from that, no one is, no one is really tackling that in the long form way that you are. So it's definitely been super cool to do that. How did you decide to do the Monday and Thursday kind of thing?
Substack has a character limit based on based on it's not them being draconian or anything. It's based on how many, like, where Google cuts off
Uh,
emails when you send them.
uh,
But I started running out of space to do both kind of the long form piece that I wanted to write and
yeah,
kind of links and listens. I guess the biggest change of the past year has been, before I might do kind of like a short thing that I wrote personally up top, and then a product of the week and a book I was reading and links and listens and just a bunch of different categories. And as I've started writing longer form things, I've just run out of space. And
yeah,
so Thursday, I realized could be a cool opportunity to keep sending those links, which I think are interesting and people have liked kind of digging into. But then it also gives me the whole other half of the email on Thursday that I can use to bring in new voices or new ideas or kind of experiment with different formats. So I kind of have just the Monday workhorse, big essay, and then Thursday I can play around with, which is fun.
no, that's awesome. What have you learned in terms of, growing the audience? I think you've seen, I mean, I think, I followed your stuff on Twitter, and I think just recently it's just like blown up a little bit. Um,
Yeah.
and so, whatever, like, what lessons have you learned, and like, how could, someone like me who has, I would say, half the amount of subscribers roughly, would can learn from that?
Yes, I think it's a few things. And just again, because of the purpose of this conversation, blow up is like such a relative term. I
Yes,
have like,
yes, yes.
which is a blow up compared to where it was a couple of months ago. But I think it's
Yeah,
just important to put
yeah,
into context that it's
yeah.
not like this unreachable number, um, which is good. But I think the whole past year has been kind of an exercise in getting over kind of like the shame and embarrassment of asking people to subscribe to something or putting something out there. For me, that was like by far the biggest worry that I had in the beginning when I started writing, was like, and I think this is true for a lot of people, and certainly talking to people in Rite of Passage, this
Mm,
was true. But that people feel like I don't have anything unique or valuable to say here. My perspective is no different than anybody else's, but maybe it's a little bit worse because I'm not anywhere near as smart as Ben Thompson, or my friends are all going to be like, what the hell is Packy doing? I had this image, and I've written about it before, but this image in my head of this text chain going on somewhere where like all of my friends were just like texting back and forth, making fun of me for writing. So it's been one, just a process of getting over that. Like, I didn't use Twitter a year ago. Now I use it and I'll tweet out whenever I write something. So like all the basics, like when I write a post, I post it to Twitter, maybe do a thread depending on the topic. I'll post it to LinkedIn if it's an essay that I wrote. I was posting to Hacker News, but I got blocked from posting anything there because I'm not really engaging the community, and their filters are actually pretty good. I'll post it to Reddit. I got banned from Wall Street Bets a couple of days ago because I just posted a link. I didn't know you weren't allowed to do that. So now I've learned that you need to post most of kind of the body of what you wrote in and then throw a link at the bottom. But so kind of posting those four spots. The biggest thing, honestly, that I did was I got a lot more clear about what I was writing about. So it went
mm,
from this mix of a bunch of different things to I'm writing about this particular thing. Then I set a goal. So I had set a goal of 1,000 subscribers by the end of the year. And then I realized, like, during quarantine, I can put more time into this. So like, let's try to get to 1,000 before the end of quarantine. And I said that out loud and wrote it in the email to my subscribers. Normally I hide at the bottom, like, hey, share this. For one of my emails, I put it front and center saying, I want to achieve this goal. Help me out. Here's a bunch of ways that you can share. And that ended up working really well. And it kind of just kickstarted this thing where it gave me encouragement to see the number grow. And so I was
mm,
more willing to just kind of experiment and try
mm.
things and ask. And I think people are generally willing to help. And if they're not, they ignore it. Nobody's actually thinking like, I can't believe he asked me to share this newsletter.
Yeah.
So just getting over that embarrassment of asking people to help spread the word, I think was one of the biggest kind of just mental shifts.
No, I think, because that's how I feel. I feel, that someone's going to be like, hey, how dare he asked me to share it. But it's glad to, it's reassuring to hear that that's not always the case.
And look at the email. I did this as well. Like, look at the newsletters that you subscribe to. It asks you to share up top, in the middle. Like,
Uh,
that's part of how this works. Like,
Yeah.
Right now, we're both making a trade where we spend a bunch of hours a week putting something together that we think people will like to read. Um, and the kind of exchange is, if they do like it,
Yeah.
share it, and that's really all that we ask.
Yeah.
So I think it's a trade that people are generally willing to make. I think one other thing on this, and then I want to hear how you've grown yours. But one other thing that was just a little shift that I read recently. I went back to a post that Ben Thompson had written in 2017 on local news.
Yeah.
And one of the things that he talks about is when you're building a subscription business, you're not asking for a donation. Like the LA Times, unfortunately, was just had to kind of ask for donations to keep business alive. But
Yeah.
he was saying it's a product. Like what you're delivering is reliable content on a relatively set schedule that people know that they can trust and they know what to expect from you.
Yeah.
And that's a product. And so you're asking someone to pay for a product. You're not asking someone, or in this case, to share a product.
Yeah.
And you're not asking for charity or help or whatever. If you're writing something good,
Yeah.
then that's kind of the trade. So how
Yeah.
about you? How have you thought about it?
So in terms of growing, one of the core concepts is just like having distribution built into your writing. So when I do write, I think about who could potentially share this snippet from the newsletter. And so I'll typically write a lot about like smaller businesses. So I try and avoid, like every now and then, like last week, I talked about Zoom just because I had a bunch of thoughts accumulating. But typically I'll write about smaller companies. Like I wrote about Readwise was a great, I did a whole kind of deep dive into their like strategy and how they've grown over the past couple of years. And, I think that might have been the most closest I've come to being viral.
Nice. Who
Yeah,
did Dan share it?
yeah, like Dan shared it, Tristan shared it. I mean, a bunch of people shared it, and yeah, that definitely led to a lot of people coming in, and that's exactly the kind of audience I want, right? Like, I mean, it's like
It's
exactly
books and technology. Yeah.
it's books and technology, and so I think once you figure that out and you start and like authors retweet my stuff all the time, and yeah, I think that's been the core like distribution engine is just, hey, like how can I make my writing shareable
Mhm.
in some way. And that's that's a completely different lens than, hey, like let's write something for a self-indulgence, which is what I had probably for the first few months of starting it. And you definitely become sharper in terms of that view.
It's so interesting. Yeah, I think probably what I write is not very shareable at all. And so it's an interesting way to think about how you build in distribution to the thing that you write. How do you balance building in distribution with quality?
Yeah, I mean it's I think about it like how is what I'm writing different from what everyone else is saying. And I think that if it's a smaller business, it's much easier to get that because I mean, as long as you're not bashing them, they'll almost always, give you the retweet or give you the, share your stuff. I think if it's someone that, and I can't think of a specific example, but if it's someone that you're, analyzing and, how is your take different than what everyone else is saying? Almost always works. And that doesn't just mean like contrarian for contrarian's sake, but how can like if someone made a decision, like if it seems non-obvious, I mean, people are not like stupid. Like they think about, like somehow that decision, like there was a logical, someone thought, hey, this is a logical decision to be made. And what I'm trying to like is reverse engineer that, is what were they thinking. um,
Cool.
and so I think that's always an interesting take, and that's worked for me, at least in terms of sharing, or getting people to like share my stuff. And then another thing is, you have the newsletter, and then I have a blog, where I would I will post longer form things. So for example, I did an episode breakdown of one of my favorite TV shows called The Crown. And it was just like, I'm trying to get more, or I'm trying to learn more about cinematography and kind of how like shots are composed and like how music plays into all that. And so I basically did I think it was like 4,000 words, basically almost doing a shot by shot, or like at least act by act analysis of this episode, which I just thought was amazing. And yeah, I mean, and like that kind of got me into a different field than I would usually, talk about. And so I had tons of people joining who were like, hey, this is really cool. Like no one in our community writes about this stuff. And so, I think the longer form pieces sort of complement the newsletter really well. And then every time I write about something that I feel is somewhat evergreen, in terms of, I think, Spotify and podcasting, or, like the business of bundling. I don't think the principles of that are going to change anytime soon. And so I'll kind of do a repost on the blog, or actually write in the blog and just link to it in my newsletter.
Cool. And I guess this is, one of the things that we got out of Rite of Passage was like what your stack is. Yeah. So do you want to share kind of what your stack is for people who are listening?
Yeah, I mean, so obviously I just use, Substack for the newsletters. I use Squarespace for my website. I've actually had some sort of a Squarespace website for about 3 years. I have to say I've written more in 2020 than I have in all other years combined. In terms of, I don't have a great note-taking. I think the Rome cult is,
be careful.
Yes. I don't want the Twitter mob on me. But it just isn't, I used it. I was like, okay, I get the appeal. It just didn't appeal to me. And so I just use a combination of Bear and Drafts for all my notes. And yeah, that's pretty much it. I don't use anything fancy in terms of my note-taking method. I always feel like that's been a thing I want to do, but I honestly don't feel that handicapped by it. Yeah. And so as long as it's not I'm trying to operate on the principle, if it's not broken, let's not try and fix it. But yeah.
Cool. Where do you want to take the newsletter in the next year, 5 years? Pick your time frame. Like, what's the point of it? Where do you want it to go? What do you want to get out of it?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great question, and one I was about to ask you. But I think for me, it's, I'm gonna graduate in a month, and I'm gonna graduate college in a month. And for me, it's a way to stay connected. I'm going into a job that's not necessarily along the lines of, what I talk about in the newsletter. And so in college, it's kind of easy to kind of decide your own intellectual journey. And I think for me, at least the next year, I'm looking at this as a way to stay connected to this side of me, and these interests of mine, and almost as a forcing function to not let this side of me go, if that makes sense.
It does.
And I think longer term, I think if I can keep doing it, which I fully intend on, is just as a long-term career asset. I mean, I've already had opportunity. Like, people have reached out with like job offers and things like that, and just been like, that almost seems insane to me. Yeah. But I think if I can keep that going, I mean, I think there's a huge compounding effect. Forget about the actual quality, just the signaling. Like there's a compounding in the signaling of, hey, this person has not missed a week in 52 weeks. And take that to 100, take that to 150 weeks. Like I think that's super powerful. And so I am very confident that my career in no small way over the next 10 years is going to be shaped by this newsletter, in some form. I feel very confident making that statement.
Yeah, I'm 10 years in now, and I wish badly that I had started doing this then. I mean, it's like, I was just on a call with somebody and we were talking about the magic of compounding, which is a very kind of like nerdy finance thing that you have to talk about if you've worked in finance at any point. But it's also equally true, I think, in writing. So the fact that you're getting to start, it's like starting to save significant amounts of money right out of college.
Yeah. I mean, it's, I think about it whenever I see you, zoom past me in number of subscribers, I think to myself, don't worry, I've got a 10-year head start on him. I'll catch up. I'll be
You
fine.
will. If you're not further along at my age in terms of followers or subscribers, then you've done something horribly wrong.
Yeah. And so, I mean, I'd be curious, like how does it fit into your like personal and professional journey, and how do you see it grow in the next, again, pick your time frame.
Yeah. So I think I've been given this gift. I mean, I think it was certainly just like, for me, not even holding on to that side of me, but kind of recapturing it. Definitely both in finance and a breather, total workaholic, 100% into my job. And so like wanting to kind of recapture the creative side a little bit, and just like put words to the things that I'm thinking and kind of talk to my friends about, but have never really fleshed out more fully. Now that I've been given this kind of like quarantine gift of, before this, trying to start an in-person social club, which obviously is not progressing right now. We have the community going and it's simmering. We're doing virtual events, but it's not a full-time job, certainly right now. So I've been given the gift of being able to just dive into this. And I really want to see how much I can grow this over the next, X number of months, call it by the end of the year, and see if this can be a meaningful part of what I do professionally. And I want to design kind of career where a bunch of different things kind of are interconnected and work together. And so whether that's starting a business in the newsletter space, whether that's getting this to the point where I can make this at least a really good side income that gives me the comfort that I know I can only take jobs that really excite me.
Yeah.
To your point, it leads to all sorts of kind of interesting career opportunities. So just going for it right now, and we'll see where it ends up going.
No, that's awesome. I mean, to end, I'd love to know, like, let's say someone who wants to start a newsletter is watching this and says to themselves, this newsletter thing sounds cool, but I'm not sure if I have something, interesting to say or not. Well, what kind of advice would you give them?
I think everybody does. Like, I get really, really jealous of the people who have these really niche-y seeming interests. Like they love this one particular video game or something.
Yeah.
And they can write about that every week and have
Yeah.
a huge and dedicated and passionate audience.
Yeah.
And they're okay writers. They're, like they have a very specific niche, but because they're clearly so passionate about that thing, it comes across in their writing. They become the go-to person for that. So number one piece of advice is you probably do have something interesting to say and pick your niche. That said, I also, like, when I heard that a year ago, was like, yeah, I don't really have anything that interesting or niche-y that I'm I'm passionate about business strategy. And that is something that a lot of people write about and people write about really well. So maybe you don't have a niche, but if you do, hit it. And if you have something that other people are also interested in, figure out what your unique take is on it. But I do think everybody has something to say.
No, I mean, yeah, totally. I 100% agree with that.
Like, even if you're a bad writer, like even if your thing is I'm a bad writer, you could write something about being a bad writer and your process of like going through and being a bad writer. So I think like there's really not an excuse.
No, totally. I mean, yeah, I 100% agree. And I think, one of the things, and I don't remember if this was in David's class or I came across this somewhere else, but I heard this phrase, which is what's obvious to you is not obvious to others. And I think that just that phrase alone um, pushes me to, tackle seemingly common subjects or, with just the process of you writing it, like, is going to be unique in some way because everyone is a different person. And so, yeah, I mean, I think the advice is, uh, I think it was Reid Hoffman who said like jump and then like build a plane on the way down about like
Yeah.
startups. And I think it's the same, it's the same thing. And I think treating, like, one piece of advice that I would give anyone is that treat it seriously, like treat it as a professional. Like when you show up, like be respectful to your writer. They're giving you, a few minutes of of their time every week or whatever your cadence is. And in a world where there's so many alternatives, like Instagram stories, your friends, your like friend group chats, like Twitter, whatever. Like I think it's a privilege that we're able to reach and kind of borrow that amount of time and then give something in return. And so I feel really, really fortunate to be able to do this, even as just like a personal curiosity thing. Um, uh, yeah, I mean, I'm excited to see where you take things next, man. I
You
think
too. And well, now I have a new goal, which is grow so fast now that even with your 10-year head start, you can't catch me. So.
Yeah, you're like you're looking at the metrics with me at the back of my back of your shoulders.
I'll put a ghost line on my graph.
Totally. Let's make that happen. But yeah, man. Thanks so much for doing this. This was super fun. And yeah. If anyone has any questions for either of us, like, what's a good place to reach you?
Yeah, so I guess my plugs are, I'm always on Twitter, so you can find me there at Packy Packym, or subscribe to the newsletter and reply. And it's notboring.substack.com. How about you?
Yeah, I think for me, the best place is just the newsletter, which is getsnapshots.com. And that'll get you to a subscribe form. And then
so you didn't mention that in your stack, by the way. What do you use to get snapshots.com?
Oh, just Hover. I think it's just a simple domain like register, and I think it was like $10 a year. And I think saying like I hate I really wish that they offered custom domains, and it really bothers me.
I've heard rumors that they do for like $50 a month or something.
I've heard rumors that they do. You just have to be like super important, and so I do feel left out. And yeah, I mean, at some point they will offer custom domains, and I will move everything to that. But right now, it's just a simple redirect. And on Twitter at SIDHARTHAJHA. But easiest is just the newsletter. I have my email, I think, in every issue, so someone can just find it and send me a quick email. Yeah, man. This was super fun. And I'm excited. For I just saw your latest issue come out today. So, and I'm going to read it right after this.
Amazing.
All right, man.
Thank you for setting this up. This was awesome.
Yeah, of course.